but we're in for a real treat this morning with this presentation. Faith is an OT, and she's from the UK, and she studied research methods. And I think we're going to have an excellent presentation. She has years and years of experience. I'm not going to say how many. And the interesting part, as I was reading a short bio, was that she likes the interdisciplinary approach to treatment. So we're looking forward to your presentation, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Ooh, I'm not as tall. Hello. I always wanted to hit 6 feet, but I'd never even got close. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming to an 8:30 session, all the way at the farthest point from the breakfast. So give yourselves a hand for that. We're going to go on this journey together, metaphorically and actually, about air travel, in part because I have to give credit where credit is due, and this really is the lion's share of this is the work of my colleague Jessica, who unfortunately had to leave at very short notice. So I'm covering all the information's there. Everything has links. If I don't know something, I have my email and I can get back to you. Please be nice. I was learning last night the difference between Tammy Baldwin and Tammy Duckworth, the Congress people, but please don't ask me in detail. Okay, here we go. But I do know my little bits of it, so here we go. The objectives are here, just like you've got your information there. So we want to make sure that you feel comfortable with at least one of the many US mandates about flight for people who use durable medical equipment, and in this case, particularly wheelchairs. And also to be aware of a couple of design ideas that are being developed. There's quite a few for in-cabin use of wheelchairs. Also to know a bit more about securement and a little bit about how manufacturers are participating in this effort. And full disclosure. So here we go. So both Jessica and I are OTs, and we both work for Sunrise Medical. You'll see those Sunrise Medical logos right there. Neither of us get any commission for any Sunrise thing being sold, but that is our employer. So I do want to be quite straightforward about that. Okay, great. So first of all, how many people are even traveling with wheelchairs is a good place to start. And I'll have to hand it to you, in the US, you keep better data than we do in the UK. In fact, you're required to put out a report now. Very recently, some legislation went through where you have to put out a report every month or so. All the major airlines have to say, and by major, they are the airlines that carry the top sort of percent of, if they carry 1% or more, I wasn't saying right, of passenger traffic, they have to put out a report. So really every big airline, it would have to be a very small airline not to be in that group. And their code share partners, which is new. They have to say everybody that's taking flights and everybody using a wheelchair and all the wheelchairs that were classified as mishandled. So that data is out every single month, and I'll show you where to access that. So this one says November, but in further slides, I have even more recent data of last year. There were 62,000 wheelchairs that flew around, and that's out of a total of 744,000 flights. So lots of flying, but lots of wheelchairs are represented in that. I've also got some data here for Canada. Who's from Canada in here? Hey, good place. I want to visit. Okay. Canada's doing a lot of things. I will say this is mostly focused on UK and US with a touch on Canada and a touch on Europe, but really worth checking out all that Canada is doing because some very good things happening there. But we did put some data here. We couldn't find direct data on the number of wheelchairs mishandled, but a lot of people out there are using wheelchairs, almost 300,000, and many of those people are flying. And it was a similar thing in the United Kingdom. We don't have the direct statistics, but looking at population numbers, still pretty big. Estimates of up to 150,000 people who use wheelchairs are flying. So any way you slice it, lots of people out there flying. So, and this is why the US is a little bit better than some of the rest of us with their statistics. From 2018, an act was passed, the Federal Reauthorization Act, which was an update of an older act. that said these statistics have to be kept. And now the most recent data from March, which reflects on January, was that 871 wheelchairs were mishandled in the month of January of this year. And that represents about 1.6 of everybody who's flying around who uses a wheelchair. So that percentage seems fairly durable as well. It kind of goes up to 1.5, down to 1.4. So that's still quite a significant amount of wheelchairs are being mishandled. If you want to look it up, it's in the handout. The PDF is now live on the app. I've got links for everything there, but that's what the whole table would look at, like if you ever wanted to geek out. Okay, so just to bring it sort of in real terms, wanted to talk a bit about why this matters so much. I think in a way I'm probably preaching to the converted here, and what we want to prevent. And very tragically, this lady, Ingracia Figueroa, she was a longtime disability advocate in the United States, and on a United Airlines flight, unfortunately, her obviously quite bespoke for her wheelchair was damaged. She had to use an interim bit of equipment that wasn't very good. She developed some serious health complications, and sadly, those led to the end of her life. So even though looking at something like 1.6%, you think, oh, well, that's something, but is it that much? It's a huge tragedy, obviously, to everyone involved, and an avoidable one. These are some other examples. Again, I have to give credit to Jessica. These are all her pictures here of some of the damage that happens. So it's, to use the words of my colleague Mendel Yui-Chutin, who's actually at the conference, I just ran into him, going on a plane is a bit like putting your wheelchair through a shredder sometimes. Maybe it won't be, but you just don't quite know what's going to happen at the other end. So we actually did some work with Sunrise Medical, and we did a survey that just finished up early this year to find out a little bit more. And we use social media with some of our partners. Corey Lee is a man who uses a wheelchair, and he has a blog. He does a lot of travel, and just put this survey out to see what some users out there are reporting in addition to the official data. I can't go through every question in here, but again, it's in the PDF. But just if you look at the highlights here, we had total, we had over 477 answers, but we had 477 answers, but not everybody answered every question. But if you look at this, you'll see that mostly people are taking manual and folding manual rigid and manual folding chairs and power chairs, but also there are some scooters and other types of equipment there. And this is where things get interesting. We just asked some sort of straightforward questions about where the chair is stowed. Overwhelmingly, people said it's in the cargo hold, and that is in line with what other researchers said as well as what airlines are capable of doing. Most people did have loss or damage. We have to acknowledge it's an online survey. Obviously, people might be more motivated to respond if they've had a particularly memorable experience one way or another, but that's what came out. And many people did make efforts to protect, almost 80%, so that's good, but a lot of people didn't. So that's also maybe a thing to reflect on. Are we supporting our clients to give their wheelchair the best chance of arriving at the other side all right? Some other questions we asked were, well, what have you done to protect it? That almost 80%. The biggest thing by far you could see is really labeling and taking some of the bits off, which makes sense. It's not hard to do, doesn't really cost very much. We had some people who did disengage the batteries. That's not necessarily necessary to do, but it is something you need to tell the crew to do so they can do it. But yeah, we did have some people do that. Not very many people, if you look, did a lot of kind of protective stuff. And to be fair, that might be something that we have to look at. Is there that much out there? There are a few things, but in a way, not that much. So keys to lock the joystick and stuff. So just a few quick examples. Of things that people can do right now without necessarily a lot of equipment. You know, it is important, obviously, that the people we serve remember that it's going to be outside. So anything that could happen out on the tarmac while they're loading the chair could happen to your chair. And people have come up also with some clever ways of protecting the joystick. As I'll talk about, there's some recommendations from ESNA actually to recommend that joysticks be removable. Almost all joysticks right now are not, because most of the time, 99.9% of the time, you don't want your joystick to come off. You want it to be on the chair. But that's also a thing for manufacturers to look at. I just put this up. It was quite clever, actually. So my colleague in the UK, in London at King's College, working with guys in St. Thomas Wheelchair Service, 3D printed this little cover for the joystick. And I actually have it if anybody wants to look at it afterwards. It's surprisingly spongy. The top of it, you can see where it's pink, is actually kind of a spiral. So it's actually softer than it one might imagine. And he's very generous. So I'm speaking for him, but maybe he'd give us the plans if we asked, I think. But yeah, but that's just something they developed in-house. And then up here at the top is some work some students did. I don't know how long that would stay on, but they're just sort of doing some experiments there. So we also asked about some supports. That's not the key focus here, but a lot of people obviously are taking things in their own hands to try to be as comfortable as they can. So looking at this in the context of some other surveys and some other research, again, Jessica was part of that survey, but this was done quite recently in 2019. It was written up in the American Occupational Therapy Association Journal. Our association letters in slightly different order. I always have to be careful. Yes, so you see some similar themes here, though. People were fearful of damage to their chair. Most of the chairs, again, well over 90% stored in the cargo hold. A lot of them didn't feel very confident in the ability of staff to handle the chair. And again, most people, at least in that survey, were also reporting damage. So there's a lot of damage happening. And I guess I don't know quite where the threshold is for mishandling. So that would be something interesting, because those are different numbers. But I guess damage could be, a certain level of scratching, depending, or it could be something more serious. So another survey, very recent one as well. This was done with the Paralyzed Veterans of America on the back of the Air Carrier Access Act, which was recently updated in the United States. And again, some of our similar things here. You had that people are good about tagging. Mostly 70% are putting some information on their chair. So that's great. That's really positive. And luckily, there's only 9% that had gotten so discouraged they've given up altogether. So I think that's an encouraging thing. Everybody wants to fly. People are still trying. Unfortunately, there's much, much more to be done. But most people, in fact, 74% reported that they were avoiding travel and traveling less than they would like to, because they were worried about damage to the chair or themselves in the form of injury. And to give credit, it wasn't just the paralyzed veterans that did this. They did this in conjunction with many, many other organizations. Again, there's the link there if you wanted to find out a little more. Also had a little look at a qualitative study. Those of you who maybe came to my other talk know I like a qualitative study. This is one out of University College London. And so this was actually looking at kind of in a small group, what were how all these numbers, how did they experience that? And again, some similar themes of worry and risk to equipment. And so I just pulled out literally one quote from it. And it was just that it's really quite a nightmare for these individuals, obviously, when the chair doesn't show up. So to wrap all of that up, these experiences that are less than positive are very, very common. There's a lot of agreement among some of the research, and that they can be a deterrent to traveling. And there is a need for guidance as well as mechanisms to do it. It's one thing to know you need to protect your chair, but okay, how can I do it and how much is it going to cost is also another question. And just for our survey that we did recently, it was a quick online survey, so I like to acknowledge that. So that sampling and recruitment weren't quite what we'd like to do. Ideally, we'd go to an airport and be there as people were checking in and truly get everybody for a few days. So there we go. So looking at stowage, like I said, overall, wheelchairs have to go in the cargo hold. Usually there's only space for one. There are some products that are designed very specifically to fit in the overhead locker. This is my colleague Sean. Actually, that's his RGK Octane. He can go up there, which is a great chair, but that chair isn't right for many people. Not everybody can afford it. And even though that chair is great, like any chair, it'll have pluses and minuses. But there are some bits of equipment that some people can use to try to get around things. I have a few quick pictures here. These are from my colleague Jessica, and I think also Mary Shea might have use some of these pictures, but just to show you very quickly, where are these chairs going when they go into the cargo hold? So sometimes they can go into a lovely container there, and they are a bit more protected. That's great. They're lifted rather than having to go up the conveyor belt, which you can see how a chair might slide down, something like that. Sometimes it's a little less straightforward and you don't have that lovely lift and container to put things in, and it's a bit smaller. And then sometimes it's a little smaller still. So we're sort of doing the Russian dolls here almost. These are still common commuter aircraft. These are still common commercial aircraft. So you can see here at that point, it's getting very small. And it goes smaller still. The Boeing MD-80 used to be a McDonnell Douglas airline, now part of Boeing. It's very small, and it's so small that most power chairs couldn't go on here. And if you're a power chair user, it might be better to take a different flight, to be honest. And I'll show you why. So to see inside, okay, looks very small. And Jessica did some nice modeling for us there with her Scandinavian hat. And Jessica, if you know her, is not a large person. So if it's that small for her, it's truly a small cargo hold. To get a power chair in there, it would probably, oh, excuse me, I keep getting caught on. It would have to be put on its side, which is terrible for a power chair and not really recommended at all. Certainly not in the UK. I don't know, what happens in America, but I can't think it's good. But it gets worse. This is another common aircraft, and you can see there's a whacking great engine in the way. Through the Open Doors organization, they gave it a proper go, and they were able to get some chairs in there if they could flip down the back and the chair had a fairly low seat to ground height. And here they are, some gentlemen, wrangling the chair in, but it did have to go on its side in the end. So that would be one not to take. Luckily, a lot of airlines now have really upped their game. I'll have to give it to United. They do have it's not a configurator, but they have a thing you can go through on their website where you can put in the flight number and it'll tell you the plane, and you can put in the dimensions of your chair, and they'll give you a sense of if it will fit. So there is information so people can book sensibly as well. It's not ideal. Ideally, you could take any flight that's convenient for you, but it's something. Also through the Open Doors organization, they've put in some nice innovations here, because we saw that high rake of the conveyor belt so that your chair can go on and not slide down and injure the hardworking people that work for airlines day in, day out, or your chair. So better for everybody. So that's what that one looks like. Okay, so that's where the chairs are going. And we've established there's some work to be done, certainly, in this area. But it's an exciting time. There's a lot of advocacy. Everybody's out traveling, as evidenced by the fact we're all here. And a lot of energy is now sort of revving up around this subject. And again, credit to the US, you're doing quite a lot of it, but not exclusively the US. But in fact, there's a political thing going on. The Paralyzed Veterans of America, who've long advocated for travel, have a lot of resources on their website for people with wheelchairs who are traveling places in an airplane. They actually have a petition on the go, Just Plain Wrong. That's something you can choose to get involved in if you like, if that aligns with what you want to do. But that website is there. But they fought for a lot, a lot of legislation, particularly around the aircraft carrier amendments that came in very, very recently. And that was with the aforementioned Congresswomen, Tammy Duckworth and Tammy Baldwin, leading that. So thank you, America, for naming your Congress people the same first name. That's easy for me to remember. Okay, so another great organization, United Spinal, has and also it's all happening June with this kind of stuff for you guys. They're doing a roll on Capitol Hill, a lot of things to do with disability rights, access, advocacy, including air travel rights. So that's a thing you may want to get involved in and find out a little bit more about. So they've always been very supportive. I also want to highlight the Open Doors organization that I mentioned. They were the guys who were doing some of the training there that we saw with how to load chairs onto airplanes. They've been going a long time, since, well, relatively a long time, 2000, out of Chicago, which is a big hub for lots of planes. So they have access to all sorts of types of planes. And they've been really working to repair chairs quickly, to train staff on how to prevent it in the first place. So a very good organization to know about. So many organizations, it's a great time. It's just, this is why you should download the PDF, because it's just a lot. So All Wheels Up, really doing some exciting stuff. So this organization was founded by Michelle Irwin, who has, her son has a disability and flies with his power chair. And they've really fought for getting particularly power chairs in cabin. Because obviously people go through all this trouble to have a chair that has the right seating for them, has support, has pressure relief, has tilt, all that kind of stuff. And then it's a very much make do. We saw briefly that first slide, you know, people using neck pillows and taking their cushion and their legs are dangling and, you know, propping things under the legs and just kind of doing the best they can. It'd be nice if this lovely chair that they can be independent in and makes them comfortable and protects them could go with them. So she's really had quite a lot of traction with this as well. And I say her, it's not just her. She's there are other people in the organization as well, but she's really been the driver behind it. And what they've done is she was the one that really started off the advocacy for the Federal Aviation Authority amendments that required a feasibility study to ask, well, is it safe to put a power chair in a cabin? You know, what is the crash testing of that? And so here's a nice picture of that. It's not perfect resolution. So here we are. We have our gentleman in his power chair taking off. I've never called a crash test dummy a gentleman before. My bar is getting low. But anyways, there we are. So he's going places though. And it did well. The lovely systems that are on the chairs that have been tested for cars did the trick to standards for this. So that was really, really great. There are still questions as far as power chairs meeting regulations for aircraft seating, but it passed this test, which was very exciting. So unfortunately, I have to go on because there's just so much work. I want to this is a light highlight, and you're welcome to read more on any of these. So a little closer to home, yay. Queen Elizabeth Foundation, they do lots of different things, but in this context, they do the Try Before You Fly program, which is really an excellent program. I encourage you to have a look on the website. Even if somebody isn't coming to the United Kingdom, there's some nice resources there. And so they have several resources on their website, a travel checklist, and they're in 3 different locations, not just one, despite being a fairly small country. People can go and try some of the equipment they might try on a plane. So things like hoists, different supports that the airline might use. So then when they do the real thing, they've had that experience and they have a sense of what works. And there are actually like simulated airplane fuselages in 3 different places. So there's a London location, Leeds in the north. For those of you who are fans of the Bronte sisters, that's Leeds up there. And the other one is near me, but why do I have to look? Birmingham, where I literally live. Birmingham is the other one where I will be flying to later today. So there we go. So really good work that's being done there. Flying disabled. Oh, and I did mention, sorry, to give credit where credit is due, a lot of Graham Race, MBE. He was the gentleman who really was pushing for that and was one of the early advocates and really got it going. Flying Disabled is another organization. Came together in 2017. Chris Wood is actually, he has both of his children are wheelchair users, and he put this group together on the back of that, and he actually does consulting for accessibility on airlines. That's what he does. And he's actually gone on to make a consortium with himself, a big design firm called Priestman Good, who make cars and all sorts of things, and a standards group. And they've actually put together a design, and they're pushing to actually have a new way to put chairs in the cabin that don't require taking seats out, because no airline really wants to give up seats, because obviously that's so key to them being able to run their business. But they do have he's very active on Twitter, so a good Twitter account to follow to just stay current on what's going on if you are pressed for time, as I imagine many of us are. This was a really interesting organization I wanted to include and highlight. This is one actually out of the UK as well. Mary Doyle runs, It's called Flying Scholarships for Disabled People. And actually, this is a yearly program that provides a scholarship to a few individuals with disabilities to do flying if they want to become a pilot and they learn to fly a light aircraft. And I thought that was really exciting because that's a very unique program. And she herself is an amazing lady who is also a pilot of a light aircraft. And so there we go. That's a good one to know about. Airlines for America, also good to know about. This is actually an industry lobby group, but what's great about them is they're always trying to have training packages put together that airlines can access. So it's, airlines will work with each other on that. So they're a very useful one to know about. Okay, so that's all that. And to be fair, there's more advocacy. There's so many great people out there individually, bloggers. So if I've missed somebody you know of, I apologize. And at the questions at the end, I invite you to share because some of you probably know some great organizations and individuals. But just for time's sake, we did have to limit it, unfortunately. So some of these individuals here will be very familiar to many of you: Roy Cooper, Peter Axelson, and Alan Jets. I'm not sure how to pronounce his surname, actually, but these three individuals have formed the Transportation Research Board, and they're the ones who then they were behind doing the technical feasibility study that the Reauthorization Act required. So all these organizations are really working together, and there's the full name of it: Technical Feasibility of a Wheelchair Securement Concept for Airline Travel, a Preliminary Assessment. And you can see it's extremely recent, just last year. So what it found out, what the focus of it was really looking at the doorway and interior space, as well as could the floor structure handle the chair. It's one thing to crash test the chair, but it has to obviously go into the airplane, and we all know particularly power chairs are quite heavy, and is that all right? And they also looked at crash worthiness, and they looked at it in the context of how would it be for the occupant. I don't know how much of you have looked into some of you may know about sort of different crash testing standards for wheelchairs, and it's not always about what happens to the occupant. So they really did bother to look at that, which is great. So they had a look, and it came out quite good. It is, as they, we use the word something's technically something, but this actually is a technical thing. It is technically feasible. And they looked at some common aircraft. So Boeing 337, Airbus 320. They, in their study, they set it up. They did have to remove 2 rows of seats. So obviously that's a real challenge because airlines may not be so keen to do that. But at least they got this far. I mean, it's only last year, it's the first step, so very, very exciting. Also, there was a study to look at evacuation procedures because it's obviously not enough for the chair to work, but sadly, unfortunately, there are emergencies and everybody needs to get out. So that's really still being looked at under the EVAC program. So that's out there, and I encourage you to have a little look at it and read a bit more about that. Another research is ongoing. Quite a few universities are involving their students and their academic staff in projects to look into there's so many different aspects of traveling safely with a wheelchair. Drake University, some universities in Chicago are doing this, and All Wheels Up, the organization I mentioned earlier that did the crash testing with the crash test dummy on the sort of platform there. They're working to create a fund for universities to be able to tap into who want to do research, because obviously all this does cost a fair bit of money. There's a bit of equipment, the time of the researchers, etc. And that's going through, and that's an American initiative. So well done, guys. I'm glad to hear that is ongoing. So that hasn't happened yet, but that's all in process, hopefully. So there was an interesting essay actually written not that long ago from Canada. So I have a little bit of Canadian representation here, but all these airlines do work in conjunction, because obviously when you're flying, you're going somewhere. So it is probably the one industry that has to cooperate in some ways. And he brought up the point in his article, a very useful article to read. It's in the references at the end. It's the one with walrus in the title, if you want to remember. But they make money by selling seats. So he made the point that that is something really to look at when we're looking at these in-cabin designs. It's really important that we are not sacrificing seats, or not very many seats. But luckily, there are some very recent innovations where some manufacturers of aircraft seating are starting to address that challenge. One of them is out of Colorado. I'm not sure if it's Molon Lab. I don't know anybody from Colorado who thinks that. Thank you for that. Molon Labe. Do you know what that means? It's Greek. It's Greek to me. I feel slightly better about not being able to pronounce it then. Thank you for that. There's so much knowledge in this room. You could just throw out a question and answers just come. It's like going to the mountain, but I just stand here. Okay, great. So Molon Labe has done, they have a few seats and it's not tested yet. There's not quite a prototype stage, but they're working hard and they have been refining. I've been checking in over the last year. Well, not really the last year, since November, since we've been putting this presentation together, and it's kind of evolved over that time. So the idea is it's for economy or premium economy where there are two wider seats and one, as you can see, can slide over the other. So there's not really a loss of a seat. So it's a very exciting design and I wish them well with that. Another one that from Sunrise Medical we've been very privileged to collaborate with is the Air for All system. That's actually a UK chair. That's the Q100. I think Australia do Q100. Yes, Australia does it as well. So it's a nice basic economical power chair that a lot of people might use in travel. It's not all singing, all dancing, tilt in space and dynamic systems, but it's a good everyday chair for people that have sort of more mild needs. But anyway, so we provided them that equipment, and this is the group that involves Chris Wood from Flying Disabled, and also involves Paul Priestman from Priestman Good Design, and Nigel Smith from SWS Certification, which is a group that certifies different kinds of seats for airplanes. You might know them from, for a while, there was a New Zealand airline that in economy class was trying to make it so you can make a bed in economy class and have 4 seats together. SWS certification was involved in that project. So very experienced in the airline industry. And so there is this Air for All system. And they said something nice about Sunrise Medical, which is nice. So thanks for that, Air for All. So I have a video. Let's see if it works, so you can see how this system would work. We haven't specified. I think the idea is to make a space and people come in their own chairs. Yeah, because then they'd have to, if it wasn't the right chair, there'd be all sorts of liability and all of that jazz, I would imagine. In that one. So it's up to the width of the actual seat itself. So I think airline seats usually around 46 centimeters plus armrests. So I'll say 48, but if somebody else goes a bit deeper in this, it may be a few centimeters off of that. Yeah, if somebody's saying in inches, 20. Yeah, we have to, yes, in old money. Yes, 20. Okay. I think we might have to leave questions to the end. We'll just repeat this one so it can be heard on the live stream. Yeah. But there was a question on all airplane aisles the same width, and your spidey sense might be telling you no, and they're not. So that's obviously a consideration. But I'm excited that it's come to the point. If I go back to our oh, can we play? Oh, you get to play it once. Don't try it again. That's greedy. But what's great about it is that it's starting that innovation. It's a way to get a chair on there. And obviously with this, you couldn't use dynamic powered seating functions. So it wouldn't be right for all users, but it's a step in the right direction. And it works with ISOFIX standards for docking systems you could have on a chair anyway. So it's a lot farther than we've come before, still much more to do. So very exciting their work they're doing there. Okay, there we are. It's kind of mesmerizing watching that video, but I'm going to have to move on. So also there's been work, adapts, and you can see this on the Air for All site as well. This is to help with evacuation. So it can be placed under somebody quite quickly and can assist the crew and helping somebody get out in a hurry, because obviously things are measured in seconds when there's an emergency and the aircraft has to be evacuated, and unfortunately your chair may have to be left behind, because that's just how it is to get everybody off in 2 minutes or less. And in fact, the current standards are 90 seconds, but it's a bit of an unfair standard because it does look at young people who have no mobility problems. But yeah, so speed, every second counts. So in those emergency situations, people would have to leave their equipment. This is actually from your own US Secretary of Transportation. Just a quote there about how the US government is also getting behind wanting to allow more chairs in cabin. So that's also politics change. Who knows what's on the horizon, but it's encouraging. It's a little something that there's some support for it at higher levels. And in fact, you do have the Federal Reauthorization Act, as I spoke about before, that came along in 2018. But if you wanted to read about it, we have information in the references. But from that was developed the ACAA committee that this one that it was established that advises then lawmakers on standards that are necessary, and so and you'll see the next few slides. There's many committees that have been established. So they're always looking at standards for flying, for checklists, making sure things are accessible, and putting that into law. So very, very exciting. Oh, in fact, I have a quote here. I'll read it straight out because that would be better than me telling you. The ACAA Advisory Committee shall advise the Secretary of Transportation on issues related to the needs of passengers with disabilities in air travel through recommendations and reports based on deliberation of topics. So that's nice. So also there's a government watchdog. So are these committees doing what they're supposed to do? The Government Accountability Office, and they actually, now some of this has been around long enough, they've just put out their first report about some of the efforts the government is doing in the United States to make air travel more accessible. And it was a pretty good report. They've identified some ongoing barriers to accessible air travel, as you can listen from, because obviously they look at all disabilities, not wheelchairs, which is our focus today. So things like access, sensory issues, obviously our handling and stowage, which is an ongoing problem. And they've looked at what, are the airlines doing the things they've been asked to? So that's great to have that semi-external group that's looking at that as well. And if you do want to learn more about that, I have the link at the bottom there. And very recently, just this year, these are the individuals involved. Dina Titus, I don't know if I'm saying the name right. Tammy Baldwin and Tammy Duckworth. It's really it expands on the original ACAA, and it basically gives some more legal protections to individuals. They can take airlines into a civil type court. It also states that the Secretary of Transportation has to establish some new standards to do with some issues of access to things like ticketing counters, etc. And then once those are established, the airlines have 5 years to comply. They can't just drag their feet forever. So that's some really very recent developments that are quite exciting. So I've just mentioned briefly about Canada. It's not my expertise at all, but every time I kept reading about Canada, there's more and more going on. So a lot of support for individuals who require wheelchairs when they're traveling in Canada. We encourage you guys to read, because it's just very close by if you're not Canadian, and if you are, obviously this is local to yourselves. Again, more in Canada. They actually are the location for an international working group, and put together a very nice PDF not that long ago, 2021, on stowage of devices. Another report I would suggest you read through for some good guidelines. Right, and I bring you to my local group here, this UK Civil Aviation Authority. Sort of bumping along because we used to be part of the EU, so we're having to find our way forward on that. This is very much heavily based on old EU guidelines. These do align actually with the American standards from the Federal Aviation Authority. And one of the things they say that I wanted to point out that might be useful for all of us to know who support people who are traveling with this equipment is that if somebody has a mobility device and they're taking bits off, so say a power chair is going in the hold or a manual chair, and you're taking off the headrest and the joystick and the cushions and the backrest, so these things don't get damaged, which is probably a good idea, they can go in a duffel bag and go into the cabin at no extra charge. That doesn't count for luggage. People are allowed to do that. And sometimes it's helpful just to be empowered and know that that is in law. That's not really down to the airline. Although airlines do have, they can say if chairs can fly and if batteries can fly, etc. They do, if they're worried, they have to have a reason. They can't just say, I don't feel like it, but they can say we limit, to so many amount of mobility devices on a flight because of the size of the plane, or if there's a safety concern, but they need to say why. They can't just say people can't fly. So there are a couple of websites. I put them up there because it's very linked in with your FAA standards, but also you might be working with individuals that want to come and visit us. And so you can see what happens once they land, then those are the regulations that would apply. They're very, very similar, but there are some small differences to the extent where this was actually one of Jessica's colleagues was traveling around Europe, and she went to Italy, and she could take the flight there, and then the flight, she was flying then to the UK and then back to America, but she couldn't, her original flight, she couldn't take her chair on in between. So it's worth checking out every single destination people are going to, because there will be some small differences, but they're getting more and more standard. Also, if you really want to geek out, here are the European Union equivalents of the Access to Air Travel Act. And there they are. I've got a link if you want to read. They're very similar. I think one of the big differences is in the US, in addition to your very good statistics, you have more compensation for individuals. If the chair is wrecked, it has to be replaced, whatever it costs more or less. But there is a cap if somebody's traveling to Europe. So definitely get travel insurance because it may not cover the full cost of equipment. So that's worth knowing. But you can read in much more depth there. And now we're getting into what I kind of like, some of the international collaboration, and there is quite a lot. RESNA, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, RESNA, IATA, which is, it's the, I have to always get the International Aviation Travel Authority, and Airlines for America, which we heard about before. All of them are together in a working group, and they talk about standards. They've developed their own checklist, a lot of checklists in this presentation, mobility aid checklist, and they are in communication. So there is some nice collaboration in this space, very encouraging. And speaking of IATA, they set the standards for everybody and I just put basically a quote here, global standards for airline safety, security, efficiency, and sustainability. And they're involved with our governments and yours, and their headquarters is there in Canada. Wheelchair batteries have to conform to their standards, and lots of surprisingly accessible, I thought, information on their website, including a recent report about how to take batteries. RESNA also has developed its own standards. Some of these are over and above some of the others that I've talked about, and some of them are a little bit aspirational. For example, now you can, per FAA standards, per IATA standards, take a wet cell battery on a plane if it meets certain criteria. Luckily, they're kind of rare anymore, but RESNA, and I think probably rightly so, would like to go to non-spillable batteries only. It's kind of rare you get non-spillable batteries, but it is possible. So they developed their own recommendations. Peter Axelson was one of the leads on this, and I mentioned that because I'm going to show the next few slides that you'll see one showing a chair and then some with a black background. Those are very much repurposed from the work he's done, and that full presentation is at that link below if you want to see the full thing. But I thought it was just a good demonstration of 33 inches. Look, I did inches. Is a good guide for getting chairs in most aircraft. Now, it may be to get that 33 inches, something has to happen to the seat, etc. He also wanted to, or that group wants to standardize some of the labeling. And so here we have just some examples for the battery disengagement, motor disengagement, battery isolation, manual lifting points, not the armrests. Bad things happen. Tie down points, that's a very familiar one. Like I said before, they've developed their own standards. If you want to find out what the IATA ones are, though, I've got a link there. And like I said, there are times that you can take spillable lead acid batteries, but non-spillable is best. Lithium-ion batteries, however, have their own regulations. And now there's more and more equipment that uses them. All these lovely power assist devices that Amy will be talking about actually later. Many of them have lithium-ion batteries. Some very small folding power chairs do now. We have one in the UK, the Q50 Carbon, that's very, very small and folds. So they have some special regulations. So just if you're working with a client or you're a client, sorry, I'm using the UK terms, an individual, rider is the US term, who uses a wheelchair. The best thing to do is read the manufacturer's guidelines. It'll be in the owner's manual, and read what the airline is saying. If you remember nothing else from this, that'll get you the rest of the way. So that's out there. And I just want to say there's been a lot of standards also looking at, with all these tags, what should we put on it? British standards, that is a code of practice. It's quite expensive to get that, but they have started looking at transport more. This is more for road transport, but it has some overlap. NARTS has a tag they recommend using that's available on their website. The AT80 group has a tag. Oh, excuse me. Sorry. AT80 group has a tag. So what we did as manufacturers, we wanted to make it just a little bit friendlier. It's fine to use any and all of those tags or make one up, but we just wanted to support some people that might be using some of the chairs that we make. So this is a UK initiative. On our website, we have tags that people can download that show a typical mid-wheel drive, front-wheel drive, and rear-wheel drive chair. So they can point to lifting points. It looks like the chair in front of the crew. It's bright orange. That was convenient, that's our colors. So that's there, but those other tags are great too, but this is very much for the UK based on IATA standards and what NRRTS are saying NARTS. And we're about to launch a pilot program where we're going to start putting QR codes on our chairs. So at the airport, that could be scanned and go to this website. And for fun, if you want to scan that, it should work. It did on the screen earlier. So that's available to scan, and it's obviously in the PDF as well. So that website is live and it will grow. It's got tags on it. It also has the original battery certificates because some airlines demand that. So lots of references went into this in addition to the websites on the slide. So if you want to read more, plenty of information that you can read on your own trip back perhaps today. And by the time you get through that, I'm sure you will land no matter where your destination is. So I wanted to say a huge thank you to everybody for this early morning session. And I think we have just a little bit of time for a few questions.
We have about 10 minutes. If you do have a question, I'd ask that you speak into the microphone because we want to make sure it was picked up to anybody that's online. So any questions?
Great, thank you so much. What a great presentation. So I was wondering if there are any training programs that are done also with either baggage handlers or actually the staff on the plane themselves.
Yeah, there's a couple. So Open Doors is very good about that. And then the Airlines for America is a source of that. So yeah, those are two places to go. That's probably where I'd start. I'm sure there is more in the American context. And then the Queen Elizabeth Foundation works with airlines for us as well as IATA. Good question, thank you.
One of your slides about the Boeing 737 mentioned that power chairs need a special handle to fit. Do you know exactly what that meant?
Ah, gosh, a special handle? I'm not sure what I've said. They should fit. Okay. Oh, is it about folding the backrest down? Let's see. Not sure exactly what that is. Sorry, I'll just see if I can go to the slide and let's see. Back to the Boeing 737. Our little friend here. Special handling to pass the door. It might have been my pronunciation with very little coffee this morning. Yes, because it's that tiny little door. So they really have to fold down and not every single chair can get in there. So yeah, thank you, good question.
Do you know if there's any resources for those tags that come in different languages, just to be accessible, that not everybody who's loading is
Definitely.
English speaker primary
Yeah,
language?
good question. And I thought about that because I was behind developing the tags for Sunrise Medical. Probably, not that I know of from the work I did here, but it is an exciting time now. It's not that hard to put things into DeepL or Google Translate, and it will probably be close enough. So if you're going to fly, you could, it's a PDF, so people can cut and paste, and we have those tags are printable. So that is a little bit of a workaround. It's not as nice as just print, and it might be wonky language, and sometimes wonky language can get you in trouble. So that would be the best practice, to have a proper translation. Yeah, thank you. And it's something that's a recommendation. So if you're flying to, France, it's probably worth printing one off in French as well. Yeah, good point.
I have two questions. One is maybe a little foolish, but is there an easy way to know what equipment is planned for a flight when you're looking at booking flights? So you can tell what equipment the airline is going to put on that flight that you're trying to book?
Yeah, really always suggest contact the airline. When you book.
So, no easy way online.
Yeah, well, it depends on the airline. So, and it's always changing. So the best thing is to just send an email and say, I'm looking at this flight, what would be, because it's probably changing day to day. Like I said about United, they'll tell you if your chair will fit. But if you tell them the flight you're going on, they'll know the model of aircraft. So it's reasonable they should have to say, well, we use an aisle chair or whatever. So, and they do generally want to help people. The other thing is when people book, and I know Mary Shea did a great presentation about that whole sort of, because this presentation wasn't quite about, door to door getting on the plane. When you book the flight, it's recommended that you go ahead right away, and in the passenger information, you're putting in about your passport, put what kind of equipment in there, and then they can help prepare. Yeah,
because you can buy your flight and you usually have 24 hours to cancel. So you have 24 hours to confirm what the equipment is. So
that's a really good point, actually, because people might, you book you don't
want to lose the ticket if you found a seat.
Yeah.
The other question is that that ticket that I think Peter Axelson and Resna was working on.
Yes.
And those were not language specific. Those were images that would hopefully not need translation.
Yeah, that's the idea.
How do we print one of those? Is that, or is that not public yet?
It's not, it hasn't gone through. It's something they're working on. A lot of these symbols are very similar to what's already out there. You'll see the on, off, etc. So I would suggest, you've got the information there, and get in touch directly. And it's on the PDF as well, because it's probably very hard to see on this slide here. Yeah, and then find out, because that's something they want to put in place. Good questions, actually.
So more to the point that it's airline specific, and it sounds like this is similar to the Queen Elizabeth Foundation efforts. I do know that Delta Airlines, so their location based out of Detroit, specifically does a lot with our disabled traveling and travel planning, where you can actually call ahead, and even if you don't have a flight planned, you can show up at the airport. They'll run you through the full process of what that looks like. The benefit to that is also that they don't necessarily speak our language. So even if you explain what your equipment is, until they see it, they may have dealt with it before, and they can tell you things ahead of time of what to expect or what to do to protect your equipment or through the process.
Fantastic. What a great resource. Thank you for that. It's always great to come to these sessions because of all the knowledge in the room. Thank you for letting us know about that one.
And any other questions?
Or comments, because that was really helpful too.
Sure.
At least in the States, there's the option, like if you have a rigid chair, to strap it down to the seat next to you. But that's not really commonly communicated by airlines.
Okay, that's interesting. Is it something that's at the discretion of the airlines, or is it they have to, if there's an empty seat, they have to let you do it?
They have to, regardless if there's an empty seat. Like if you need your chair and you're afraid for it to get damaged, if it can fit on the seat with the wheels removed, strapped down, they will have to ask another passenger to leave the flight and provide them a different ticket.
Oh, really? Is there that's excellent. Is there a resource for that where people can go to?
I believe it's right in the Air Carrier Access Act.
Okay, Cool. So that's something for people to look through and find that.
They do use the term folding wheelchair, but they do not mean a folding frame chair. Normally that can fit in the closet. They mean a rigid chair with a folding backrest.
Right, yeah. And that's kind of to the point of their language isn't our language necessarily, isn't it? Yeah.
Any other questions? Well, I want to thank our, I'm sorry?
It's fine.
Good, thank you. No, we have a few more minutes. I'm just getting tired, that's all.
Grand finale day of the conference.
I hope it's a good comment. I just wanted to piggyback off of her comment about Delta. We also have a partnership with Delta, and we'll take our inpatient rehabbers over to do airline training, and they'll get all the way through security, get an understanding of what kind of the security checkpoint looks like, and then transfer on to the aisle chair. So just as much as you can kind of reach out to your local airlines, I'm sure they would be willing to learn with you and help your folks learn that process.
Thank you. That's great. Well done, Delta. They've done well for themselves today. Good, good. Because, yeah, I think, yeah, mostly airlines do want to be helpful. So that sounds an excellent program. Thank you for that.